If I claimed to be an Atelier fan, I wouldn't be lying. If I claimed to have played more than the most recent trilogy, I would be lying, because I've only played Atelier Ryza. But look, I have the Mysterious Trilogy, and when I get the first chance, I'll definitely be all up in the finale of Ryza. But I do like them, and it's one of my favorite games I've played this year so far. My fandom of RPGs generally skews towards a certain kind of RPG, so I'm biased towards Ryza. And it may be why I ended up really enjoying it. Regardless, with the upcoming adaptation, I wanted to ruminate about Atelier Ryza, why I like it, parts that I think would be interesting to see how they would adapt, and skirting around my hopes. One of my favorite genres in media is slice of life, and this even applies to games, and often the ones I play have a mixture of slice of life along with another genre. For example, Moonlighter, where you're playing as a shopkeep by day and a dungeon delver by night. The daytime aspects have a relatively relaxed atmosphere, the gameplay is less intensive, and the managerial aspects are the forefront. It's a good breather for the inevitability of the later action. This blend of a lightness in between action is something I have a lot of fun with, and if the story can match that atmosphere, even better. That is to say, that's what Atelier Ryza is, a game with slower moments where they can focus on somberness. Atelier Ryza does have an overarching story. There is a conflict they must solve due to their lives being put in danger, and the series of events chains until resolution. But my favorite parts of Ryza's story was when I instead met with island folk and learned about the setting's community. The game's producer, in an interview before the game's launch, had described Ryza as having fret and conflict, but that this isn't a chronicle of heroic deeds. And instead, it shows events that might happen during a student's summer vacation. It's a coming of age, not necessarily a fantasy action. And I think this vision of the game is key to the strengths of the story. The adaptation may end up diverting from this to better fit with its more limited time of having a set amount of episodes, or my hope is that it takes that and spins it in its own way. For me, I hope the show indulges in taking its time with the varied cast of the setting. For example, there was a questline where you help Rolf, a handyman who can't find the right person to help. By the end of his questline, you end up getting him to a different part of the island, and he ends up in a mentor-apprentice relationship while revitalizing one of the island's commerce specialties, which involves another side character. And the man you find is also related to a whole other set of side characters and another quest chain, where you discover and learn about a trio of friends' memories on this island. And that side quest happens independent of this one. None of this matters for the story, but this helped me get a better sense of the setting, of the people surrounding Ryza. There's a good sense of history, in that this place has colorful residents. Even if these aren't heroic deeds, it gave me insight into a place that is lived in. And I think it's important to portray and have these kinds of side stories because it does eventually give weight to why the setting matters and enhances the stakes. Later on, we actually learn about why this community exists and the origins of this island. This is part of the main plot, but to really feel the setting has an impact, it's necessary to feel like the place has sentimental value to the characters. And so, these slice of life side stories are vital in giving us that insight and weight. That's the strength of Ryza's story for me, and if I had simply skipped all of that, the impact of the big spoiler reveal later on may not have felt so important, because I wouldn't have known why Ryza or the cast cares about these people. I wouldn't have been involved in their lives as we get to do by doing side quests. In another interview with ANN, the producer is asked about the coziness of the game, and he responds by saying how the Atelier series in general is conscious of daily life. And so, for Ryza, that is no different, and they are pushing that to the forefront. In other words, I hope that people who come into this don't expect something that the original source isn't even trying to be. And likewise, I hope the show leads into that, putting the daily life at the forefront. Because, well, that's what the original's conception is supposed to be. An adaptation can deviate from that, and I think it would be interesting to see if they do deviate, but I would also hope they fill that hole with something of equal value. I don't mind an adaptation if it has a vision of its own, but I would hope it does what it wants well. The other part of the adaptation that I'm quite interested in seeing is how they translate gameplay. I mean, I like the combat. It's turn-based, except everyone moves simultaneously with a trackable timeline. There are a few options to pause time, but for the most part it's constant. At first it felt overwhelming and even unintuitive, but as I got used to it, it became a mix of execution and strategy. It didn't feel turn-based and it even got me more invested. The main trio is made up of a fledgling alchemist who is a farmer's daughter, the son of a mercenary who isn't well trained at the start of the story, and a nerd. For the sake of gameplay, they can fight, but these aren't trained combatants, and so this idea of brief pauses in the combat and how things are chaotic and sporadic because of the real-time nature made it feel more immersive. These people are a ragtag group of friends who are now just encountering monsters. It's going to be chaotic and wild and a bit frustrating to be thrown in combat. There's also the idea of each character's combat style leading into how they are as people. Ryza wields a staff and can whack enemies, but she's more of a caster. She's throwing alchemy bombs and other random concoctions. She's an alchemist who has found her pathway in life through a less conventional yet explosive and flashy way, mirroring her style in battle. Lent wields a giant-ass sword and is the vanguard. He's mostly an up-close fighter. Rarely would you utilize projectiles with him, and his strengths are in being a great offensive tank. This fits his personality of wanting to be tough and overcoming his shortcomings due to conflict with his father and wanting to prove himself. And Tao is a nerd, but his weapon is a hammer, which makes sense because he isn't actually a nerd, he just has a curiosity and a penchant to learn. The idea of a hammer, a wieldy, hard-hitting blunt weapon, fits him pretty well, even though he's like shooting magical beams, as his lack of physical prowess makes other traditional weapons harder to use. But a hammer is pretty simple, and it lets him focus on things he's interested in. While I'm all here for a slice-of-life focused adaptation, keeping in some aspects of the gameplay just makes sense for parts of the story, and so I hope those parts are well represented because the game, while not focused on the combat, does have it, and I think it can add to the characterization if directed in such a way to reveal that. However, arguably, the main gameplay is alchemy. It's what the Atelier franchise is based around and known for. I can't say one way or the other because I've only played Ryza, but I really enjoyed the alchemy of Ryza, and it's broken up for me into 3 parts. First, we gather materials. We get out into the world and start exploring, maybe fighting, but mostly cutting down trees, blowing up rocks, picking up flora. It was fun getting to exist on this island, letting the sights and the music seep in as I scavenged. Then we have to cobble things together. You start with very few recipes, but as you do more quests and create more things, you'll learn new ones. Some of these recipes you can only learn through experimentation, since some items are required for other items to be made. The final part is the product. The result of alchemy always felt impactful, since most of the time you're making gear to equip, material for gear, or consumables. Basically, things are useful to progress the game. You can also customize your items with certain attributes and stats, depending on the material used. Finding the right build and route is another dimension to the crafting. There's a sense of experimentation. It really felt like creation. The process of creation to me is one that is hands-on, especially if I'm making videos or handicrafts. I need to gather materials to use, whether that's B-roll or scrap material. Then I have to put them together into a recipe, putting the pieces where they belong, but then adding in the spice, extra elements to customize and really personalize my creation. At the very end, I get a result, my work, my art that is as vital for my fulfillment in the same way that making all of these things is vital for Ryza to survive. Alchemy and creation is also at the core of Ryza's characterization, giving her opportunities to be someone else, to be someone who can help others, but also materialize and create a new part of her life. So yeah, the alchemy is really fun. I enjoy going out to get materials, finding recipes, crafting items my way. It's a gameplay loop that has clear purpose, has an experience I'm fond of, and is relaxing but also mirrors life in a way that felt good to me and helps bring out Ryza's character. I wonder just how exactly this will translate on screen. I hope we don't skimp too much on showing the process. In the game, the actual act of alchemy is all done in a pot, so there's no reference there. But all of the parts, the gathering, the sense of discovery, of enjoying creation, is something I hope they can capture. It's an important part of the story later on too. And to skimp out on showing why that's so important for Ryza to accomplish and overcome things with her imagination and creation would feel bad. I try my best not to place expectations when experiencing new media. Even if I know the source or have some bias, I want to go into things as good faith and fresh as I can, and so I may have certain hopes about this adaptation, about the parts of the original I like that I want to see represented in the slice of life and the combat and the alchemy, but at the end of the day, this version of Atelier Ryza does exist. It's the game, and if the show doesn't end up meeting those expectations, I can't really fault it for that. That's its own version, with the same writer, sure, but a different director and staff. I'll hope it has merits on its own. So has this adaptation announcement just been an easy excuse for me to explain why I like Atelier Ryza and make a precedent on this channel to talk about games? Yeah. And that was the end of the video. I wanted to get this out before the show actually aired, which from the time I'm recording this section, this outro section, which I always record last, is is on the weekend in like 5 days, so cutting it pretty close. I wanted to make this video mainly to put my 2 cents in to the ring, because if you look at a lot of the conversations about Atelier Ryza specifically, you get a lot of the same things, which is people talking about her thighs, which is understandable, but there is a lot more to it than just that. There's a lot to Atelier Ryza, and I wanted to get that out there in a, meaningful way before the show aired. And I know I cut some stuff out from the game, like Claudia, a 4th character, the quartet, but I just, wanted to truncate and save some time. And of course, if you want to show support other than having made it this far and liking and doing all of those other things, show us to my Patreon if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way. But if not, that's totally fine. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.